Before this story begins, this isn't a story about a friendship ending. It's a reflection on what silence, ambiguity, and delayed clarity can quietly do to the person who was once emotionally invested in a deeply connected friendship that both people helped build.
A short reflective series, 4 chapters, 1 lesson. When distance comes without clarity, a 4-part reflection on friendship, ambiguity, communication, and emotional resilience. Chapter 1, the distance. Chapter 2, the ambiguity. Chapter 3, the aftermath. Chapter 4, when clarity arrives too late. Sometimes the deepest pain isn't caused by the ending. It's caused by everything that remained unsaid before it. Chapter 1, the distance. When distance comes without clarity, it began as an extraordinary close friendship. We spoke every day. Calls were effortless. Silence between us was rare. Being there for each other, dependent on motivation, support, care. Then, almost without warning, everything changed. The conversations faded. The calls stopped. The warmth slowly became distance. There wasn't a clear conversation explaining what had changed or whether it was only temporary. Even when we happened to meet in common places, the silence continued. The connection that once felt natural became strangely unfamiliar. So I was left to make sense of it on my own. And that was where the real story began. The hardest part was yet to come. Chapter 2, the ambiguity. The distance wasn't what hurt the most. It was the uncertainty. I didn't know whether to message. I didn't know whether space was wanted. I didn't know whether the friendship was ending or whether I was simply expected to wait. Human beings can cope with painful truths surprisingly well when they're clear. I need 6 months of space. Painful? Yes. Confusing? No. I don't think I can continue this friendship. Again, painful, but clear. What keeps the mind awake isn't distance. It's unanswered questions. And slowly, those questions began to change me. Chapter 3 is the aftermath. So my emotional stability deteriorated by the silence and sudden unexplained distance. I became focused on understanding what had happened between both of us. Instead of asking how she is doing, my mind was occupied with the friendship and its state itself, badly missing it. Eventually, I explained how all of this had affected me badly and my pathetic state. My feelings were acknowledged, but the friendship was never clearly brought to an end. Then came another silence. Again, no calls, no messages, and chaos. Later, I was told that the friendship had ended because of my reaction. Looking back, I realized something important. The first abandonment didn't begin when the friendship ended. It began the moment distance arrived without clarity. The reaction that followed didn't happen in a vacuum. It came after weeks of confusion, uncertainty, and emotional searching. Sometimes reactions aren't the beginning of the story. They're the consequence of trying to navigate a story that was never clearly told. Chapter 4, when clarity arrives too late. Eventually, the ambiguity disappeared. The answer finally arrived. Not because the friendship had healed, but because it had already ended. There was no longer any uncertainty, no more wondering, no more waiting. It became clear that the friendship would not return to what it once was. And strangely, that clarity didn't erase the pain. It only changed its shape. One question still remained. Why wasn't this said earlier? But it didn't change what the silence had done. By then, life had already moved on. New friendships had formed. New priorities had taken their place. The conversations that once filled every day had become brief exchanges every couple of weeks. Not hostile, not close, just different. And that's when another lesson quietly appeared. Sometimes clarity doesn't arrive to save a relationship. It arrives to confirm that the chapter has already ended. The tragedy wasn't that clarity finally came. The tragedy was that it arrived after ambiguity had already done its damage. Sometimes, the deepest wounds aren't caused by the ending. They're caused by everything that happened before the ending was ever spoken. Clarity is valuable, but its value decreases when it arrives after prolonged ambiguity. Getting an answer eventually doesn't erase what uncertainty has already done. Sometimes we avoid difficult conversations because they feel uncomfortable. But avoidance can unintentionally create more pain than the difficult conversation itself. When your feelings change, communication is an act of compassion.
The conversation that came too late. Every relationship leaves behind a lesson. Some leave us with memories, some leave us with gratitude, and some leave us with understanding that arrives only after the ending. This story was never about whether a friendship should have continued. It was about what happens when distance begins without clarity, when silence lasts longer than communication, and when ambiguity quietly writes a story that was never intended. In the end, clarity did come, not to rebuild the friendship, not to change the decision, but simply to explain it. Sometimes, that's all closure is. A truth that arrives too late to change the ending, yet early enough to change who we become. So if this story leaves us with one lesson, let it be this. If our hearts ever change, may we have the courage to communicate before silence speaks for us. Because conversations may not always save relationships, but they can save people from carrying pain that uncertainty never had to create. Thank you for being part of this journey.